put down your phone, pause whatever is playing in the background, send the kids out of the room. Because what I am about to tell you is not a theory. It is not speculation. It was not something I read in a book or heard at a conference. This is what I have witnessed with my own eyes in my own ministry over decades of performing exorcisms, deliverance prayers, and theological discernment at the highest levels of the Catholic Church. The world has changed. I don't mean politically. I don't mean economically. I mean spiritually, at a depth that most human beings walking this earth today are completely unprepared to understand, let alone survive. What we are living through right now is not a continuation of the same spiritual battle that every generation has faced. This is something different. The nature of demonic activity has shifted. The targets have shifted. The strategies of the enemy have shifted. And the vast majority of Catholics, the vast majority of Christians, are walking directly into this battle completely unarmed, completely uninformed, and completely unaware. In 30-plus years of exorcism ministry, I have never seen anything like what we are seeing right now. The cases are different. The manifestations are different. The level of collective demonic influence over entire nations, over entire social systems, over entire cultures. It is at a level that I, as an exorcist and theologian, find genuinely alarming. So I'm going to tell you the truth today, not the comfortable truth, the real truth. Stay with me, because your soul and the souls of the people you love may depend on what you hear in the next hour. Let's begin with a foundational principle that most people either don't know or have forgotten. Demonic activity is not random. It is not chaotic. Demons are rational beings, fallen rational beings, but rational nonetheless. And that means they operate with strategy. They operate with intelligence. They operate with long-term objectives. St. Thomas Aquinas teaches us clearly that demons possess an intellect far superior to that of human beings in terms of its natural power, though it is completely disordered in its orientation toward evil. What this means practically is that when you see a pattern in demonic activity, when you see cases clustering in a particular way, when you see the same spiritual wounds showing up across thousands of souls in thousands of different locations, that is not a coincidence. That is a coordinated assault. And what I am telling you today, based on my direct experience in the ministry of exorcism, is that I am seeing a pattern right now unlike anything I have seen in over 30 years of this work. Let me explain what I mean. In traditional cases of possession and oppression, the kind we have dealt with for centuries, the demonic entry points were relatively consistent. Occult involvement, generational curses, grave personal sin, trauma that was exploited. These remain present. These have not gone away. But something has been added, something structural, something systemic. What we are now seeing is widespread collective spiritual contamination on a societal level. I want you to understand what that means theologically. When a civilization abandons God, not individually but collectively, when an entire culture turns its face away from divine truth and embraces, systematically and institutionally, the inversion of natural law, something spiritually catastrophic occurs. The demonic is given what theologians call legal right, access to afflict not just individuals, but entire populations. We have been watching this happen in slow motion for 60 years in the Western world, but something changed in the last several years. The pace accelerated dramatically, and I believe, based on what I see in the confessional, in exorcism sessions, in spiritual direction, and in my theological analysis, that we have crossed a threshold. We have entered what I would call a new phase of the spiritual battle. Here is the first thing you must understand about this new phase. The primary target has shifted from the individual to the family. The enemy has always attacked families. This is not new. But historically, the attack came through individual weakness. A husband who fell into addiction, a wife who was led into adultery, a child who was pulled into bad company. The entry point was personal sin, and the damage spread outward. What we are now seeing is an inversion of that pattern. The attack is now coming against the family as a unit, as an institution, from the outside in. The demonic influence is operating through cultural, legal, and ideological systems specifically designed to dismantle the family as God constituted it. And this is not metaphor. This is not hyperbole. I am telling you, as someone who has spent his life studying the nature of demonic influence, that the ideological movements you are watching destroy the family in the West, right now bear every hallmark of coordinated demonic strategy. Confusion of identity, destruction of fatherhood, inversion of the maternal role, the corruption of children, the severing of intergenerational bonds, the elimination of religious transmission from parent to child. Each one of these is a direct attack on the mechanisms through which faith is transmitted and through which God builds his kingdom on earth. And they are all happening simultaneously right now at a scale never seen before in human history. Now, you might say to me, Father, these things are sociological. These are cultural problems. Why are you framing them in terms of demonic activity? Well, and my answer to you is this. I have been in rooms with demons. I have spoken with them under obedience. I have heard directly from the mouths of possessed persons what the demonic agenda is. And I can tell you with theological and experiential confidence that what you are watching unfold in Western civilization right now is precisely what the demonic hierarchy has been working toward for generations. This is not a coincidence. This is a campaign, and the most terrifying part, most people, including most Catholics, don't recognize it as such. They see political problems. They see social problems. They see mental health crises, educational failures, family breakdown, cultural collapse. They analyze these things through secular frameworks, and they propose secular solutions. But you cannot fight a spiritual battle with secular weapons. That is the first and most critical thing I need you to understand today. The battle we are now in is not primarily political. It is not primarily cultural. It is not primarily psychological. It is spiritual. It is demonic. And it requires a spiritual response. I want to talk to you now about something that makes many people uncomfortable. And I understand why. Because what I am about to describe crosses the line from theology into direct experience with the demonic. And that frightens people. It should. But it should also inform you. Because one of the greatest weapons the enemy has right now is ignorance. Your ignorance of his strategies makes you vulnerable. And so within the bounds of prudent and appropriate to share, I am going to tell you what we have learned directly from demonic entities in the course of exorcism. First, a theological clarification, because this matters enormously. When an exorcist commands a demon to speak under holy obedience in the name of Jesus Christ, bound by the authority of the church, the demon is compelled to respond. And while demons are liars by nature, they are also constrained by divine authority to reveal certain things when properly commanded. The church has understood this for centuries. The ritual Romanum itself makes provision for this. What do demons reveal under obedience? They reveal strategies. They reveal foothold. They reveal the specific sins, the specific openings through which they have gained access to a soul or a family or a community. And in recent years, certain patterns have emerged from these sessions that are deeply illuminating. Here is what the demonic consistently reveals about this current moment. The first thing they reveal is this. They did not expect the internet. Now, this requires explanation. Demons are highly intelligent. They are ancient. They have observed human civilization across millennia. But the speed and totality with which digital technology has enabled the penetration of demonic influence into the interior life of virtually every human being on Earth. The access it provides directly into the minds, imaginations, and desires of billions of people simultaneously. This exceeded even their projections. The demonic has adapted to it ferociously. And what they have built through digital media is something I describe as a continuous occasion of sin. A structure that for many people makes sustained virtue nearly impossible. Think about what the average person, particularly the average young person, consumes through their devices each day. Pornography, violence, nihilism, occultism, moral relativism, gender ideology, atheism, materialism. All of it poured directly into the soul, hour after hour, from the moment of waking to the moment of sleep. From a theological standpoint, this represents an unprecedented level of demonic access to the human imagination. And the imagination, as St. Thomas and St. Ignatius both understood, is the gateway to the will. Control the imagination and you influence the will. Influence the will enough and you determine the choices. Determine the choices and you shape the soul. This is not paranoia. This is spiritual anthropology applied to the digital age. The second thing demons consistently reveal is the identity of their primary targets in this generation, the young men. I want to be very precise here, because I have seen this pattern with remarkable consistency across many cases. So the demonic focus on young men, particularly young men in the 15 to 30 age range, is extraordinary in this moment. And the strategy is coherent and deliberate. Why young men? Because it is the male, the father, the husband, the priest, the warrior, who is the natural protector of spiritual order in the family and in society. Destroy the young men, and you destroy the capacity for resistance. You eliminate the defenders before the battle is fully joined. How are they being destroyed? Through a coordinated attack on masculine identity, through pornography, which I consider one of the most diabolically effective weapons in human history, because it simultaneously destroys the capacity for authentic love, corrupts the imagination, creates chemical dependency through purposelessness, the stripping away of meaningful vocation and mission through the feminization of culture, which tells young men that their natural strengths are pathological, through the elimination of spiritual fatherhood and masculine models in the church itself. The young men I see coming into my office today are spiritually devastated in ways that would have been unthinkable 2 generations ago. And the third thing the demonic reveals, this one I want you to hear very clearly, is that they believe they are winning, not ultimately. Demons know that Christ has already won the final victory. They are not deluded about eschatology. But in terms of the immediate historical battle, the battle for souls in this generation, they believe the conditions are more favorable for them than at any point since the early church. And when I ask myself honestly, looking at the state of the Catholic Church, looking at the state of Western families, looking at the state of young people's spiritual lives, I cannot tell them they are wrong about the current conditions. What I can tell them, what I do tell them under holy obedience, is that the gates of hell shall not prevail. And that for every soul that returns to God, for every family that is consecrated to the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart, for every young man who picks up his cross and fights, the demonic calculus is disrupted. One holy soul can undo a tremendous amount of demonic work. That is why they fear the saints. That is why they fear the Holy Family. That is why they attack the sacraments and the priesthood with such ferocity, because holiness works, and they know it. I want to give you a framework now, a theological and practical framework for understanding how demonic influence operates at the societal level. Because I think many Catholics have a relatively clear sense of how demons attack individuals. What they lack is an understanding of how demonic influence scales up, how it operates through systems, institutions, and ideologies. I identify 3 primary demonic systems operating in the world today. The first is what I call the system of confusion. This is the most foundational of the 3 prin, and it operates by attacking the very capacity for truth perception in the human mind. Not by telling direct lies, that would be too obvious, but by flooding the information environment with so much contradiction, so much complexity, so much noise, that the average person loses the ability to form stable convictions about reality. This is not an accident. Confusion is one of the primary weapons of the demonic. The name diabolos, devil, literally means the one who throws across, the one who divides, who separates, who creates disorder. When you cannot determine what is true, you cannot act rightly. When you cannot act rightly, you cannot grow in virtue. When you cannot grow in virtue, you cannot reach God. The system of confusion operates through media, through education, through the arts, through social media. And its fruit is a generation of people who genuinely cannot tell you what is real, what is good, or what is true, who have been trained to regard certainty itself as arrogance and doubt as the highest intellectual virtue. This is demonically useful in the extreme. The second system is what I call the system of inversion, where the system of confusion creates uncertainty about truth. The system of inversion takes the next step and actively presents evil as good, good as evil. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. We are living in this right now, openly. The killing of children in the womb is called healthcare. The sexual corruption of children is called education. The destruction of the family is called liberation. The elimination of God from public life is called progress. The mutilation of the human body is called medicine. And simultaneously, authentic love is called hatred. The defense of children is called extremism. The proclamation of natural law is called bigotry. The practice of religion is called danger. This is not merely cultural liberalism. This is spiritual inversion, and it is the mark of an advanced stage of demonic influence over a civilization. The third system is what I call the system of isolation. The demonic has always worked to isolate. Isolation from God, isolation from the church, isolation from community, isolation from family. But the system of isolation operating today has reached a level of sophistication that genuinely staggers me. We have a generation of people who are more digitally connected than any humans in history, and more profoundly existentially alone than any humans in history. The destruction of the parish community, fragmentation of the extended family, the atomization of individuals into consumers and scroll errors and streamers, the elimination of intergenerational wisdom transmission, the substitution of digital interaction for real human presence. All of this serves the demonic agenda of preventing souls from finding the community, the witness, and the accountability structures that sustain spiritual life. A soul alone is a vulnerable soul. A family cut off from community is a vulnerable family. Church reduced to isolated individuals watching Mass on YouTube is a vulnerable church. These three systems, confusion, inversion, isolation, are not independent phenomena. They are integrated, they reinforce each other, and they are operating simultaneously right now at a global scale. Understanding this should not cause despair, but it should cause urgency, because the countermeasures to these three systems exist. They have always existed. The church has always had the answer, but you have to know what you are fighting before you can fight it effectively. Well, I need to say something now that is difficult to say as a priest. But intellectual honesty and charity towards souls requires me to say it. Part of why the world has descended to this level of spiritual crisis is because the church has not been doing her job. I say this not in a spirit of condemnation, but in a spirit of grief and urgency, because the church is the body of Christ. The church carries the sacraments. The church has the fullness of truth. The church has the authority to bind and loose. And we have been in many quarters catastrophically failing to deploy that authority in this hour of crisis. Let me be specific. The first failure is the failure of preaching. The average Catholic today, if they attend Mass at all, which statistics tell us is the minority, is not being told the truth about the spiritual battle. They are not being told about the demonic reality of the cultural war being waged against their souls and their children. They are not being equipped, instructed, or warned. They hear homilies about inclusion, about community, about being nice to one another. Important things, certainly. But souls are being lost to explicit demonic influence, to occultism, to pornography, to ideologies that are spiritually toxic. And from many pulpits, the response is silence. A shepherd who sees wolves approaching the flock and says nothing is not being charitable. He is being negligent. The second failure is the abandonment of the spiritual combat tradition. The church has a magnificent tradition of spiritual warfare, prayers, sacramentals, the exorcism rites, the rosary, fasting, the practice of custody of the senses, the theology of virtue and vice. This tradition was developed over 2,000 years, precisely because the church understood that the spiritual battle is real, is dangerous, and souls need practical weapons. In the past 60 years, much of this tradition has been sidelined, dismissed, or simply forgotten. Priests who know how to perform deliverance prayers, parishes where the rosary is prayed with urgency and faith, families that fast and do penance, lay people equipped with a real understanding of spiritual warfare, these things exist. They are not extinct, but they have been marginalized, and the souls who needed them most, particularly the young, have been left without them, and the result is visible. The result is catastrophic. The third failure, and this one cuts deepest, is the failure of witness to Catholic family life. I have been in enough broken Catholic households to know that the crisis in the world cannot be separated from the crisis in Catholic families. Divorce, contraception, spiritual indifference, fathers who have abandoned their role as the spiritual head of the home, mothers whose faith has been reduced to sentiment rather than formed conviction, children who receive sacraments but not catechesis, who were baptized but not discipled. The family is the domestic church. When the domestic church fails, the church in the world has no foundation to stand on. And we priests, bishops, the whole apparatus of Catholic education and formation, we have in too many cases failed to give Catholic families what they needed to stand. I say all of this not to discourage you, where I say it because the path forward requires honesty about where we are. You cannot navigate from a false starting point. The church is not dead. Grace is still available. The sacraments still work. The truth is still true. Mary is still our mother. The Sacred Heart is still the source of every grace we need. But we need a reformation, not of doctrine, never of doctrine, but of nerve, of backbone, of willingness to fight. Warrior.